let's go to the Sunday games. And Sam, let's get to Eagles and Commanders. Why not? Because obviously it's an easy transition. The Eagles are the 2 seed right now. The Commanders are the 7 seed. This is the leader in the NFC East against the number 2 seed, or the number 2 team in the NFC East. And this would be a playoff preview. The difference is it's in Washington at that, I don't call it a dump of a stadium, but it is officially now the worst stadium in the NFL, bar none. They know it there. They're trying to get a new one. Obviously, hopefully back to the RFK site, which I drove by in week 5, all boarded up. It looks right out of a post-apocalyptic movie these days. Hopefully you could move back into that one and get out of FedEx one of these days. But this would be the playoff game in wildcard weekend, except in the different venue. The game would be in Philadelphia if we were playing this in 3 weeks, as opposed to what it is on this week and this Sunday, where it's in Washington. The Eagles can wrap up. They're already in the playoffs. They can wrap up the NFC East with a victory. They've beaten the Commanders 6 out of 7. And as you've been pointing out the entire time, the Lions, all banged up as they are, still do, for now, hold the conference tiebreaker over the Eagles, 8-1 as compared to 7-2. I have one guarantee for this game. I guarantee you that heading into the second quarter, the Commanders will have the lead. Absolutely, unequivocally guarantee you. Because the Commanders have not been outscored in the first quarter for 12 consecutive games. So in other words, they have not headed into the second quarter trailing in 12 consecutive games. The Eagles, Sam, as you've been hitting over the head for weeks now, if not months, have gone 16 consecutive games, 4 months, 4 months without, actually 4 months going back to last year, without an opening drive touchdown.
That's just
so guarantee you, or your money back, and you pay nothing for this podcast, the Commanders will lead heading into the second quarter.
I don't even understand what's happening with the Eagles in regards to the first quarter. In fact, the game against Pittsburgh was arguably their best first quarter of the season. And then they got points. They got a field goal on the opening drive, and it was looking good, headed in that direction. But that was a game in which they also tried to give the Steelers every opportunity. Remember the 2 turnovers, and Andrew, you pointed out last week the turnovers were going to play a factor. We both had said it, and it clearly did. But in the end, it was the Steelers that the Eagles took advantage of, as opposed to the Steelers taking advantage of the 2 early turnovers, the Hurts fumble and then the muffed punt by Jayden. That could have been the game. That really could have been the game. And then there was a penalty that moved the Steelers back, et cetera. Enough about that. You're so right. The Eagles do not start well. They just don't start well. I'm not sure what it is about the first quarter, but offensively, it is not right. And Washington starts fast. One other thing to point out. Do you remember, let's go back in the time machine, when Jayden Daniels was not only the offensive rookie of the year in a runaway, but even potentially the MVP?
I never thought he was the MVP. You did. But yes, I do remember those times.
But again, in a conversation about it and what he was doing for that Washington franchise, and you growing up in that area pointed out so much how the belief in what this Washington team is doing is predicated so much on what obviously Quinn and Daniels have done. But there was that lull. Remember, Daniels started, there's no quarterback ever who has started a career with a better completion percentage than Jayden Daniels. And in fact, I think it was through 4 weeks, he had the greatest completion percentage of all time. Nobody had ever done that for 4 games. Nobody.
That's why they play 17.
And then it dropped considerably, right? I think it was, as you're pointing out, I think the last 4 games, no, I'm sorry. The last 2 games, he's been back up to 80%. But before that, there were 4 straight games where it was at 60%. So it had dropped. He had leveled off. He was likely injured. You pointed out after the Thursday night game against the Eagles, he didn't look the same. He wasn't quite the same quarterback. They weren't quite the same team because of that. And maybe they are getting that juice back. Although remember, a 2-point conversion failed by the Saints in an epic comeback last week nearly could have given them a loss. Commanders looked great in building a lead and really suspect defensively in the back half of that game, letting Spencer Rattler nearly come back and beat them. For a game, obviously, the Saints need. They're in a playoff race as well here. They are technically still alive, but that was suspect. Somebody you pointed out as being a crucial piece of this Washington team, Lattimore. Lattimore did play his first game. He was not targeted once. Lattimore has made an impact, and he'll make an impact on this game right about the time the Eagles are feeling good about their pass game, because they did pass the ball well to both AJ and Devontae against the Steelers. Lattimore is going to be a huge difference in this game for Washington. And this was obviously the Rams game is the stamp of Saquon, unlike any other game this season, with the 255 rushing, the 302 total yards. But it was that Washington Thursday nighter where he completely took over the second half, certainly the fourth quarter. Saquon was the difference. And you mentioned the Eagles won't have a lead at the end of one in this game. They were trailing at the end of two. They were trailing deep into the third quarter. They were even trailing momentarily in the fourth quarter of that game. Lopsided how the score turned out, but this will be close for those that are just assuming the Eagles and the Vikings and the Lions. It's all going to come down to that week 18. Eagles could be out of the conversation for the 1 seed here. I mean, a loss puts them very much because they're not going to hold the tiebreaker. The Eagles are not going to hold the tiebreaker over the Lions, and it even comes down to a surgical difference with what it would be with Minnesota if they finish all with 2 wins there. Obviously, we know the Lions and the Vikings cannot both finish with 2 losses because they play each other week 18. But wow, this feels like an opportunity for the Commanders to make a statement. But then again, as I mentioned about Houston, how much is the seeding going to matter? Obviously, Washington wants to clinch, but I'll say the Eagles. I never say it, but I'll say the Eagles get their T-shirts.
2 things to point out here. Number 1, congratulations to friend of the program, Bobby Wagner, who is going to play in his 200th career regular season game. In this one, he's over 200 if you include like a dozen, 15, 16 playoff games in his career, but 200 career regular season games for a guy who's going to get consideration for Canton. Tip of the cap to one Bobby Wagner. And Saquon, everyone's looking at the rushing total. Can he get to Eric Dickerson's 2105? He is on pace, on a 17-game pace to be just underneath it at 2050. I love you, Saquon. You got to do it in 16 games. This isn't a Ruth Maris thing where you're talking 154 to 162. It's a 1-game difference. I'm sorry. You got to get to 2105 in 16 games. And I don't think that is going to happen. If you get the record in 17, it's still an amazing accomplishment, man. Good for you. I'm happy for you. But Eric Dickerson, also friend of the program, and this is not a personal me defending him. It doesn't count if you don't do it in the same amount of games.
Actually,
I'm sorry. It doesn't count.
I should be on the other side of that. Just
there is no other side.
Based on the amount of Philly gear that's behind me, I should be on the other side of that. I'm actually going to agree with you when it comes to history and when it comes to those unbreakable records, which Dickerson's feels unbreakable. The greatest cheat code is handing somebody another game to try to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that exactly. is unfair, of course. Yes. Also, though, if Saquon were to do it, of course, that would be incredible, but worthy of all the things that don't need an asterisk. And I don't take away championships for COVID seasons or what. All of that's ridiculous. But an asterisk in regards to how many games, that would matter. I think it is well worth pointing out, of course, because of how long it has stood and because what it meant for Dickerson. And the only thing it would say is maybe the running back is back to being, we've said that position has sort of taken a step back, but if he were to do it, that is certainly something. I'll also say this. What risk do you run? I mean, the Eagles are playing for a Super Bowl, not for this record. Even
there's
Saquon,
no, you don't.
Yeah, you just don't. You can't. And frankly, he was banged up last week. Like this could be a lot less. I don't necessarily think we're going to go into week 18 with a chance at him doing that.
Winning a title like this is an amazing accomplishment, and it would almost be like the Lakers hanging an in-season tournament champion banner, like whatever this Emirates Cup thing was they did in Vegas last weekend, where they were giving tickets away, whatever that was.
Congrats to the Bucks, yes. Okay.
Yeah, the Bucks won.
I believe.
They I'm excited.
They were in it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, good for you.
All within the Browns, Bucks, Columbus Crew family. Yay, Bucks! I honestly didn't know that. Just saying that years from now,
I'll send you the T-shirt.
The NBA. You remember the Larry O'Brien above all else. Go Bucks!
And you would have sworn Emirates was for a soccer title anyway. So,
yeah, you would. All right, 2 more games to get to. Let's get to the Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks. That is a Sunday game that is in Seattle, where Sam reminded me the Seahawks are 3-5 at home this year. Not good in any way, shape, or form. Overall standings wise, if you want to look at that, with these two teams. Hold on, where'd my standings go? I have way too many tabs open.
You can even look at the
No,
screen.
here it is. Here it is. All right. So we got the Vikings as the 5 seed right now, and the Seahawks on the outside looking in as the 8 seed. Look, there are a couple of interesting storylines here. Obviously, Geno Smith's health. He didn't want to complain about the officiating. There was no flag thrown, and he was hit low last week. He was trying to leave his feet and throw the football. The Seahawks are a really interesting team, and remember, they have the Week 18 game on the road in Los Angeles against the Rams, who hopefully don't blow it and lose this week on the road at the Jets. And Aaron Rodgers, who, well, okay, that would be another show with the stuff he said this week.
Oh, wow.
Either way, the Vikings right now are in as a wild card. It's a hell of a long shot for the Vikings to get to the 1 seed, but they have a better shot than the Packers right now, certainly, even though the Packers are right with them. They're 10-4. They're 2 games back. The Sam Darnold future conversation doesn't maybe factor here on Sunday, but it is the most interesting thing for me about the Minnesota Vikings. And I said it back in September when Sam came out of the gates playing well. Will the Vikings regret drafting J.J. McCarthy? I think the answer is still going to be no, because if they decide to pay Sam and move on from JJ, they have a very, very, very valuable trade piece if they ever got there. And I don't think they will get there. But Sam, if this Sam Darnold goes into Seattle, lights up the Seahawks, and they take another step closer, and maybe the Lions stumble down the stretch to getting to the top of the NFC North and then winning in the postseason, with Kirk Cousins finally being benched and Michael Penix taking over and all the offseason quarterback moves that we could possibly see, I am here for Sam Darnold staying hot, playing MVP caliber. He's not going to win football, and making March that much more chaotic.
The fascinating part of this game, and what you just said is great for Darnold, and there's not a better, I mean, is this one of those, it's interesting, you actually were the one to point it out, comeback player of the year. Is Darnold up for comeback player of the year?
I don't think he should be. What did he come back from?
Well, that was the conversation, right? That we now want to make it more about
I don't want to make it an injury thing.
Exactly. Instead of I stunk one year or I was irrelevant and then now I'm something again, right? When Gino, it's pretty much the difference between, Gino, when Gino had won it, I believe that was really where the argument was.
Right. I don't think it's just to make that point again. I've said it before. I love Gino. Love him. Enjoyed every interview I've ever had with him. I love watching him play football. He's a heck of a quarterback. But when he won comeback player of the year, I said, what did he come back from? From
himself.
From mediocrity, or from not really playing great football and being behind Russell Wilson? He was a former second-round pick who, look, you could write a book. There probably will be a book one day about how everything went with the Giants. They were winning, the fight in the locker room, and then the whole thing in New York, the other New York team with Eli being benched and Gino taking over for one game and the coach getting fired and all that. It's a great story, but what did he come back from? Normally you're talking about a comeback player like Nick Chubb, for example.
Chubb would be up for it. Chubb would have absolutely, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
that's a comeback player of the year. And for people that want to go, well, what about Joe Flacco? He didn't deserve to win. It should have been DeMar Hamlin. I think Joe and Gino are very similar. Both great stories. I'm all for giving them awards. Don't know if that's the best award to give them, not to take away from their accomplishments. But yes, that's how I feel about Gino.
I love Geno Smith also and everything that he had done. And I agree with in regards to the comeback player of the year, that it's just a different conversation. Darnold's just in that Baker Mayfield where not going to be the MVP, but worthy of that conversation right outside of it because of what he's done this season. Seahawks at home. You just said it. And you've talked about what that venue is and has been. Something's up, something's different, something is strange and bizarre there. It's not the same thing. And as you mentioned, since 2009, hadn't had a losing record at home. And that looks like what it's going to be. The fact that it's just not what it used to be there. This feels like Minnesota establishing themselves. You mentioned that Minnesota maybe doesn't have that path, but of all the paths to the 1 seed, you've said it many times, the Lions injuries are just, is that eventually going to rear its head? Vikings, essentially for the 1 seed, it's in sight. I mean, it is very much in sight. And of course, it's a brutal path because it's Seahawks, Packers, and Lions, but it is there. I mean, it's
if they're
absolutely
15-2,
they're going to be. By the way, and if they are 15-2, they're the 1 seed. I believe that it has something to do with, I think, whether the Falcons or Rams finish with more wins, what the tiebreak will be between the Eagles and the Vikings if they both end up with 2 losses. But it's still, the Vikings have right now the upper hand, even if it did come down to that tiebreak. And with the head against Detroit, that'll be theirs. I will point out this. If they both finish with 3 losses in regards to Vikings and Lions, the Lions still have the tiebreak. So I believe, in other words, if the Vikings do lose a game here before that Week 18 game, that game could not mean what we think it does. Just so you know, they would end up with the same record, but Detroit would still have the tiebreak in that scenario.
Let me throw one more thing at you. 3-way ties are officiated differently than 2-way ties.
Correct.
3-way ties, where 2 of the 3 are divisional foes,
break that tie first,
are officiated differently than 3-way ties between 3 teams in 3 different divisions.
Correct.
So there are a lot of variables here.
There are,
understanding that they play each other too, which factors.
But simply this, the divisional tiebreak there is going to fall to Detroit based on who the opponents are in the division. Correct. And again, they would have the loss against Minnesota. That's right. They would have the loss against Minnesota. That's what it would come down to. But regardless, Lions still have that upper hand in all of those, both divisional and even conference.
Lions could lose to the Bears.
That's the issue, of course, if they lose a game based on the injuries, etc. Something's up with Seattle. That game against Green Bay was just not competitive, and it felt like, playoff atmosphere and something was going to happen. I so want for that game Week 18 to matter between the Seahawks and the Rams, and for that to be the division, et cetera. And it still could mean very much for Seattle to get in. I think Seattle's losing momentum because they're just not at that level. I don't think they're at the level here with Minnesota, Green Bay, even call it the Rams for that matter. And they had a chance. They should have beaten the Rams. You could argue, but the Rams to come back in that game was incredible, and what a catch in overtime, etc. And Gino with a key turnover at the end of that game to even let the Rams back in it. But Seahawks are just that was ugly, and they're not playing well, and it feels like Minnesota. Also, what's fascinating about the Vikings is it's not necessarily each week that Jefferson is so outstanding, Justin Jefferson. What defenses are actually doing is keying in on Jefferson, and he's not having that impact. It's not like Jefferson's having wow games every single week. Opening it up, though, for Addison, for Hawkinson, and for Aaron Jones. That if you really watch a Vikings game, that's actually what's happening. It's not going to Jefferson. The defense is so keyed on Jefferson, and then you've got Addison, Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones, and that's the beauty of Darnold. Darnold understands that, and he is finding and checking to the right play, and more often the case than not, he is doing that, and that's been absolutely key for them.
I'm a big Sam Darnold fan. You want to go back to 2018, one of the Browns to take him. They took Baker Mayfield. Worked out well at first, and Baker certainly has built himself a nice career, and happy for him. It's worked out for Sam Darnold as well. I didn't necessarily want Josh Allen. Full disclosure, Sam, don't clip this and put this on social. Didn't want him. Didn't want him. Loved what I saw at the Senior Bowl. We had him at the Senior Bowl for NFL Network. Thought the guy was great. Enjoyed speaking to him as well. But I, living here in Southern California as you do, having watched Sam Darnold, right? Remember, like, for example, the great back and forth against Penn State at the Rose Bowl. Like, I wanted Sam Darnold. Didn't mean I thought less of Baker, nor Josh Allen, nor Lamar Jackson, nor even Josh Rosen for that matter. That guy could spin the football.
Do you remember that conversation? Yeah. That draft, we're going to look at that. I mean, one day there'll be a documentary about that draft as well. That draft class is pretty fascinating, especially because what you're going to get. I mean, you could have two Hall of Fame careers out of that draft in regards to the 2 guys picked
right
at the end of that or further down.
7
exactly. And 32. So the fact that you've got Josh Allen Rosen came after Allen, but the fact that it was Allen and Lamar, that those are going to be the careers we talk about. And then it was Baker 1, but the conversation so much, especially because we were in Southern California probably, but that Darnold and Rosen conversation was a heated one. Yeah. And there was the piece that came out in Sports Illustrated. Yeah. Rosen was the conversation. There was a moment in time when Rosen was going to be number 1. That's what's so interesting is that's the forgotten guy there. But that draft class is so interesting, especially the way 2 of the guys are rewriting their careers in this moment. Darnold and
Absolutely.
Baker both rewriting their careers.
Speaking of guys rewriting their careers, let's go to the other game that interests us. And you may say, why on earth, if you were only picking, if you're only picking 5 games, why on earth are you picking the Jaguars visiting the Raiders in Las Vegas? Well, because if the season were to end today, we'd all be out of work. But if the season were
Does
to
it? Yeah.
end
Does it? Does
today,
it end today? No.
if you're going on Tankathon, which is a widely accepted site keeping track of draft order for future seasons for not only football, but basketball, but hockey and baseball and things like that, and the WNBA, right now, the Raiders own the number 1 overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft at 2-12. The Giants right behind him at 2-12 are number 2, followed by the Patriots and then the Jaguars. So Jacksonville is in the 4 spot. Jacksonville is one of 5, 3-11 teams. But currently, Jacksonville is the second worst of the 3-11 teams and are picking 4th. The number 1 overall pick will not be decided in this game, but it is interesting because everybody thinks that the Raiders want Shedeur Sanders, the Colorado quarterback, son of Deion, coached by his old man. Deion has actually said it out loud at an event in Vegas. He wants Antonio Pierce to coach his kid, and he wants his kid to go play quarterback for the Raiders. If the Raiders win this game with 2022 third-round pick of the Falcons, Desmond Ridder, beating 2021 Patriots first-round pick, Mac Jones, and the Raiders somehow fall out of pole position for the number 1 overall pick, and then the Giants potentially move up to number 1, or what if the Giants blow it and they beat Michael Penix in his first career start? What happens if the Patriots stun the Bills? Okay, they won't. But Bryce Young is playing well, and he's going to play the final 3 games of the year, and they play Arizona. That game's in Carolina. Nothing would shock me if Carolina won that. Down the stretch with teams jockeying for Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward potentially, because Garrett Nussmeier is going back to school. Don't know yet about Quinn Ewers, right? There is no true consensus number 1 quarterback. There are people, and there's a long way between now and the first night of the draft in Green Bay. There are plenty of people that will tell you that Cam Ward should be the number 1 guy, not Shedeur Sanders. But this game has 2 highly drafted for other teams' backups battling when one of these teams, the Jaguars, just gave over $200 million to the former number 1 overall pick, who some aren't convinced is even the guy anymore. Have fun with that one.
I'd love to have fun with that. And you hit on exactly what I was tearing my hair out to say just seconds ago. That's the conversation, is if Jacksonville ends up with number 1. That's the fun conversation
to jump over.
Yeah, it is. Look, their path is muddiest to number 1. That's true. We know New England, if New England ended up with 1, the idea that they would draft a quarterback with what we've seen from Drake May seems at this point not likely.
Unlikely, but you sell the pick off.
Of course. And again, what happened again? New England, Mac Jones looked good early. Remember, Mac Jones, that was a playoff team. Mac Jones led the Patriots to the playoffs. They got destroyed by the Bills in the wild card round, but that was a team that made the playoffs with Belichick and Mac Jones. So in other words, they've seen a nice season out of a young quarterback before to know that it wasn't exactly their future. So maybe Drake May has not convinced everyone in the building, but that seems most unlikely. Trevor Lawrence, would you draft another number 1 overall quarterback?
The guy. You can't.
Do you remember? You remember, obviously,
the new
Kyler Murray
hasn't even kicked in yet.
Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray. That's what happened, right? Arizona.
Josh Rosen,
he wasn't number 1
on a rookie contract,
and he wasn't number 1. He wasn't the first overall where Trevor is. Right.
Rookie contract, easily tradable.
Do you tie yourself to the money, or do you tie yourself to the opportunity?
The money's real, and it's a real anchor.
So is it then just a bargaining chip and you're saying we're all in with Trevor and then obviously they could trade it? I mean, it's not like you don't want the number 1 seed.
You have to. Like it is such. We talk about for example, the Denver Broncos have 84 million on the dead cap this year. They drafted a rookie quarterback. They cut Russell Wilson. They made that move. They're severely limited financially. They drafted the right quarterback and they're well coached. And Vance Joseph has put together a great defense. And they have finds like Nick Bonito, guys like that playing great, and it's working. Obviously the Browns have an issue with Deshaun Watson's contract. What do? Don't know. Don't have an opinion, nor too much insight sitting here. But the Jaguars just handed out that contract over the summer. The new money, I bet you, hasn't even kicked in. The signing bonus certainly kicked in. It is as untradeable a deal without looking at it on paper, and maybe I'm wrong, but I know this at a bare minimum. It is prohibitive. You simply cannot do it. I don't think they're going to get the number 1.
I'd love to see. I think of all the places that Shedeur could end up, it does. Yes, the Raiders seems most fun. That just yeah. I mean, New York's interesting. Although New York's offensive line is so bad.
But you don't know who's going to coach New York.
True, but New York's offensive line is so bad, and not that the Raiders is amazing.
If the Raiders is
good. No, it's not. It's not. It's not.
Okay.
It's not. But it's. I mean,
it's poor.
It's
matter of fact, you want to go through the offensive lines for every one of the top 10? Vegas bad, Giants bad, Patriots horrible.
Yeah, awful.
Jaguars traded Cam Robinson, got a middling return. Panthers.
Panthers.
Titans.
I mean, Panthers have been able to run the ball. Panthers have been able to run the ball, but
the Titans have gone O-line in the first round each of the last 2 years. O-line's getting better.
Yeah.
Browns, when healthy, good O-line.
Yeah, for sure.
So Jets. It was better this year, but a lot of pieces that were on short-term veteran deals. Who knows what it looks like next year under whomever is leading. So
yeah, I'd like to, again, the most dramatic thing, the Jacksonville thing with Trevor there. Yeah, the idea that they would have both of those quarterbacks seems ridiculous, but teams have done wild things and decided they're all in. I just don't know that. I don't know. I would say the consensus on Shedeur and Cam being a can't miss prospect, that's not there. I don't think can't miss is used with either one of those two names.
Correct.
This was not the quarterback. This was not considered a quarterback rich draft class for 2025. So we're probably having more fun with it than it really is.
Talked up between now and then.
But is it actually right?
Every
of course.
I would argue that it's almost better if you're not drafting a quarterback to be 2 this year. But who knows? That remains to be seen. I just think it's fascinating, this one. And if the Jaguars somehow do get the number 1 overall pick, they will have the number 1 overall pick 3 out of 5 years. And in that window, they made the playoffs and won a playoff game. Think about that. If the Panthers get it, it will be 3 consecutive years in which they at least held the pick, which is also absurd. Either way, that's it for us. Sam, it's been fun. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah.
Yes,
happy. To you and yours as well out there. Please be safe. Travel safely. Move swiftly through airports and get out of the way for everyone else. And hope this holiday season brings you joy, happiness, peace, health, merriment, and good stuff in your stocking, if that's what you do. For Sam, I'm Andrew. Like, subscribe, and share. We appreciate you listening and watching. This is Thinking Out Loud. So long, everybody.